We just start, yeah. Okay. Hi everybody, and welcome to our DisMed Roundtable. I'm Ashley Brown, and I'll be moderating today. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Glasgow. I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and a myriad of mental health conditions, so I feel really privileged to be able to be part of this space and kind of introduce people. So what we're going to do is we're going to hear from our 6 speakers one at a time. I'll introduce them each. Then what we'll do is we'll have a book announcement, and then we'll go into our Q&A. Please feel free to stand up, use the space, move around, whatever is best to make you comfortable during this time. So we'll start with Hope. So Hope Docherty Harrison is currently a Leverhulme Early Career Fellow in History of Art at the University of Edinburgh, and in September she will join Birkbeck, University of London, as a lecturer in medieval studies. Hope co-edited the book Towards an Accessible Academy, Perspectives from Disabled Medievalists, and is the author of Love and Anti-Judaism in Medieval English Romance, Typologies of Violence and Desire. She is now writing a book about Judas in the Middle Ages. Hope was diagnosed with autism in 2016 when she was an undergraduate. So Hope, take it away. The wee camera's here.
Cool.
As well.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
Hi. Thanks so much. I'm delighted to be part of DisMed, and I'm particularly happy to be here after the publication of our book, which I'm sure Alex will tell you more about. So I just wanted to talk a bit about, I suppose, my experience of precarity and teaching and writing alongside those conditions, which was kind of the space I was in when we were first talking about the book and when I was first writing my chapter and reading others. So what I was doing was, so I was on a sort of teaching only contract that was extended. There was 1 year, and then it was extended in the middle, very luckily, for another year. And I was desperately trying to fit in research alongside it. And I ended up using my commute on the train from Glasgow, where I was living, to Edinburgh, where I was teaching. And I was thinking, sort of just as a side note, we're kind of living in a time where this actually might be more kind of typical of the student experience as well as our own. So I was very privileged as an undergraduate, and I didn't have a job, but most of my students now, I would say, actually have part-time jobs, and they're kind of fitting in their studies alongside it. So I suppose that just kind of occurs to me as potentially a kind of powerful mode of empathy between staff and students as well, as one of the very few positives that we can maybe take from precarity. So I started realizing the impact of this lifestyle, not just on the amount of research that I got done, but on the texts and ideas I felt able to research and able to concentrate on. So I wrote a book on romance because, for me, the texture of romance, I don't really know what I mean by that, but I couldn't find another word. It felt easier to hold in my head alongside like the other stuff that was going on. So not just kind of teaching and planning and marking, but I was also doing like citizenship roles, like seminar convening, and also student events was one of my roles. And romance's energy for me, it felt like it was easiest to sustain mentally and intellectually alongside the energy of the classroom. So something that I really felt is maybe related to the way I experience autism is that I feel like I have to give a lot of myself in the classroom, and I kind of experience the effects of that afterwards. So I kind of get simultaneously exhausted but unable to rest if I have too much social contact, and especially when I'm kind of in front of people. Not necessarily now. I'm saying this not like but I and conferences are a delight in their own way, but and I do really enjoy teaching, but it's kind of it doesn't negate the exhaustion, the enjoyment of teaching. I think that's sometimes quite difficult to express to people, especially I think because it's kind of become understandably in our current moment in higher education, to when people are getting more and more teaching hours, to kind of talk about teaching in a negative way. But actually I think it's important to be able to say I enjoy teaching, but it takes a lot out of me as well, and they kind of just coexist as things that happen. And I was thinking particularly of there was a very difficult semester at the start of 2023 when I had a class who were really quiet, and it's no one's fault and you can't predict it, but different groups have different dynamics, and I think sometimes when you realize that you have to sort of give much more energy for these kind of discussions and ideas and kind of lovely things that happen in the classroom, you have to kind of do more with your own energy and your own voice to get there. I think that kind of magnifies the exhaustion that I think some people feel alongside the very positive parts of teaching. So for example, this also affected kind of, the text I was choosing for research. So I love Piers Plowman. Does anyone know Piers Plowman? Kind of really long kind of Middle English 14th century theological dream poem, notoriously difficult. And I think the density of that was kind of something I felt unable to really sustain. So I did it for both my undergrad and my master's dissertations. I diversified a bit for my PhD, but I always thought it was be the first thing I'd return to after my PhD, and I just couldn't balance it. And I think Piers Plowman is also a very precarious text in many ways, but also the ending leaves just so many unanswered questions. So I wonder if that is maybe something that I just couldn't hold in my head at the same time as this kind of being on kind of fixed term teaching only employment. So I just wanted to share this just to say, I suppose we talk very much, I think, and we're very good at talking about how precarity governs how much research we can do, but I think we could talk more about and in more interesting ways how precarity actually can restrict the topics and the ideas that we're able to work with at any one time as well. So thanks so much. Hopefully I'm not over time.
No, perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, so next we have Wendy. So Wendy J. Turner is a professor of history at Augusta University. The main focus of her research is the intersection between law and medicine in medieval England, with special attention given to mental health, learning disabilities, and intelligence. Her most recent publication is investigating the life cycle of the medieval English soldier, disability, mental trauma, and medicine in connection with war in late medieval English records. That's in Disability and War in the Late Middle Ages, can't speak now. She is co-editor of the Cultural History of Madness in the Middle Ages, which is due out in the fall, and a special issue of the Journal of Culture Unbound on Monsters and the Law. So I'll just give you a wee hands up when you've got 1 minute left, if that's all right. And your wee camera's here.
Hello. So I have always felt a little bit of an interloper here, mostly because I work on the history of disabilities, and yet I wasn't disabled. And now as I get older, they told me when I was about 12 that this would happen, that I would begin to lose my eyesight and my hearing, and I am doing both. So I wear hearing aids, which most of my students don't realize, and then they whisper in the back corner, and I just, on my phone, turn them up. It's just great. It's great. Which I didn't realize was a thing, and for a long time I was too vain to actually go and seek help. And so it's interesting where I've landed. But anyway, and so glasses about a decade, hearing aids a little less, but both of those happened about the same time. And that's because my pituitary is dying. So it's anyway. Big breath. Okay, so when I started down this journey of studying disabilities in the Middle Ages, it was the 1990s, and no one believed that I would have enough information to fill an entire book. They actually didn't think disability, mental health would be enough for me to write a dissertation. And I think about 50 articles and 8 books later, I think I've proved them wrong. Now I am going to make myself cry. Okay, so in the early 2000s, when I first began to lecture publicly, this is supposed to be about teaching, my disabled students would often sit in my lectures and cry. It was, I think, especially then, you can imagine in the year 2000. Sorry, I'm making myself cry. Gosh. Okay, just give me a sec. They didn't have a history. And it's not, I know, I'm gonna make everybody cry now. Okay, so and they didn't have a history. And it's nice to have been able to contribute to that. Hello. To contribute to that corpus of information about what disabilities was in the past, and not just the medieval past, but all the past, and to bring that to life, both in terms of the archaeology, but also the history and the literature and other parts of that giant body of scholarship that we have created over the last 25 years. And yes, there were a few people working on those types of things a little earlier, but they were really hit and miss. And it was often almost a laugh, like, oh, and by the way, there were these other things that were going on. And, you know, we had people, we had differences in bodies. And they really were not looking at the bigger picture of what humanity looks like. And we're all part of that. And it's just, yay, we're here. And may you all continue as I get close to retirement. But I don't know, I'll leave it there. My students love my stories, by the way. I have incorporated disability history not only in my history classes, and all of them have a unit on disabilities, but also in all of the bioethics courses that I teach. I'm the director of bioethics at my university. And so all of the MDs that come through my class, or nursing students, they all get a taste of what the Middle Ages is like and what the history of disabilities looks like. So go team.
Thank you very much for that, Wendy. That was very moving, and I'm sure that lots of people will have lots of questions later. So we've got Marie next. So Marie Sophie Benson is a PhD candidate in Icelandic and comparative literature at the University of Iceland and the University of Strasbourg. Her work revolves around the role of rewriting in feminist forms of magical realism. Through previous research, she developed research interests including narratology, intertextuality, stylistics, intermediality, representations of mental life, and the study of concepts such as reality and time through literature, which is very impressive. Her contribution to the international research project Kvenspor, unearthing and foregrounding women in Icelandic saga landscapes, led to her work specifically on the sagas of Icelanders. So I'll just give you a wee wave, and you've got 1 minute left, and your camera is here.
Thank you. So my goal today is not just to vent or complain, even though I am French, but to try, this is not a cliche, it is true, but try to draw some attention to issues most people might not be aware of and don't have to be aware of, and to eventually try to discuss some solutions, question mark. So I want to talk here about systemic challenges that are aggravated by international research paths, and discuss a bit what we can do on a scientific level. So today, European and international agreements facilitate academic mobility for all, but disability causes administrative issues that make it difficult for us to pursue careers that we are motivated and competent for, but disabled. I met that especially in my first year of PhD when I was on a French grant that did not allow me to take a sick leave, for example, because the sick leave would have to be signed by a French doctor who would have to see me in person while I was in Iceland, and obviously unable to travel to France for that. Now I am on a partial sick leave, 50%. I am paid by Iceland and an Icelandic grant, and the sick leave is paid out of my PhD grant, which means that virtually I don't have sick leave because I need to be done within the same time frame. These are just examples of how the snake is eating itself, and how things just become aggravated for disabled people, and especially international ones. It makes it impossible also to get any kind of disability recognition because we are not anywhere for long enough to seek an official recognition. And that is aggravated by the medical systems lacking international cooperation. I think that's even more true for people like me with long COVID, because there is an objective lack of univocal scientific knowledge, and that pushes everyone to just write their own truth, and each country has their own idea on what it is and how it is treated. But in uncommon cases like mine, I won't go into details, but even for long COVID, I am an uncommon case. It's even more difficult to find help and to coordinate it because there is a suspicion around us. And this suspicion is by healthcare professional, because it's double. I report strange things, and the documents I bring are strange because they're from abroad. So people usually don't even read them because they don't trust the methods and knowledge from this abroad. Add to this that I'm a young queer woman. We know where that goes. But globally, that's a climate of suspicion that goes everywhere in society and even in academia. And being an international researcher is even more of a problem when there is an environmental factor to the illness. A year ago, I was diagnosed with a very severe case of mold toxicity. I was then living in student housing, so the only two possible sources were the PhD office and student housing. I was nowhere else. And both student housing and the university refused to test for mold. And I was then advised to go finish my PhD in France by the university. And this advice would never have been given to someone who is not in an international path. So basically, it means that they can let me down because I have somewhere else to go. So sometimes it even plays against us. But there is hope. The bottom line, and why I wanted to talk today, is there are still things outside of the systemic issues that I think we can do to deal with how this illness affects our academic path, especially for people like me, for who it affects academic and intellectual capacities, such as memories and the ability to switch languages. I speak 4 every day, and I currently can't switch easily. So that's interesting. And I think it's actually a broader discussion on how we can use diverse skills in academia. Because, for example, in my path, I used first a lot of writing before being sick, comparative close reading, and I was competent and trained in art, but that was a different part of my life. Now that I am sick, I am leaning a lot toward practice as research because it's interesting, because I have the skills to do it, but also because this is what I can do now. Because now that I have ADHD-like symptoms, screen intolerance, and I need 18 hours of physical activities per week to support my body, I need to think with my body, otherwise that doesn't work. And that's something that academia doesn't understand well. If you have so little energy and you are so sick, so you can't write your thesis, why the hell are you doing something else? And that's the suspicion I was talking about earlier. And I think that's where we can all kind of do something. It's like I'm expected to sit in front of a computer and able to work and cry because I can't. And trust me, that also happens. And that's why better understood that just standing up, doing interesting things that I can do that bring me a relief and that eventually contribute to other forms of academic progress. There is more and more of us with long COVID and other disabilities. So I think that's where we need to figure out something and to find sustainable ways for people to be able to work as much or as little as they can, but also to work in ways that bring them success rather than watching them fail in conventional ways.
Thank you so much, Marie. I think thinking with your body, I think, is such a beautiful tagline that I definitely want to use. Next, we have Rosalind. Amazing. Rosalind Phillips Solomon did their undergraduate degree in History of Art at Cambridge, followed by a master's degree in the Medieval Studies at York. Over the course of their studies, their health deteriorated and they've had to come to terms with life as a disabled person. This September, they will begin their PhD at the Courtnauld Institute of Art, which sounds very exciting. Their research focuses on death and mourning, another subject with which they have lived experience. They are currently working on an article about a monument to 2 young children commissioned by their mother, Anne de Bretagne. So thank you so much. I'll just give you a little wave. Oh, you're right. So this area is mic.
Am I audible here? Can people hear me?
Cool. Okay, I'll give you a little wave when you've got a minute left. That's perfect.
So, good morning, everyone. Today I'm going to be sharing some of my thoughts about my experience of illness and pain and how they've shaped my approach to the past. I want to briefly question the idea that individuals or groups of people simply become used to suffering. Here I see used to it as an unsatisfactory answer in place of proper interrogation of all the complexities which come with adapting to suffering. I felt it would be wrong to spend 5 minutes talking about my own experience of pain without acknowledging the ways in which race and class impact access to healthcare and pain management. So this is meant to be a reflection based on my experiences and not a pity party. And I'm also very aware that my journey has been eased with immense privilege. So this presentation was ultimately inspired by a conversation I had many years ago, which completely perplexed me and has kind of shaped my academic career. I was working on images of Saint Apollonia, a virgin martyr, having her teeth pulled out. During this conversation, I referred to the process of tooth extraction without anesthesia, which some medieval viewers of these artworks may have had to undergo. I called it traumatic, and I was met with resistance from this person who said, Ros, they were used to pain. I personally doubt anyone could get used to tooth extraction, or even these images, which were very graphic, of tooth extraction, no matter how familiar they were with the procedure or with pain itself. Underlying this phrase, used to it, is this assumption that people become inured to suffering through repeated exposure. And my experience with chronic pain helps me see that it's so often more complicated than that. In a similar vein, for my MA thesis, I looked at a woman who had multiple children die, and this is another area where I think historians and the general public can be a bit callous because of the prevalence of infant mortality. If we assume that medieval people or people in the past, or just anyone, is used to suffering, we miss out on important opportunities to explore how people managed and suffered during difficult circumstances. If we settle for used to it, we allow that suffering to remain invisible. I know that my own pain has been invisible to those around me because of its frequency and how well I mask it. I expect pain, I rarely comment on it, and I accept levels of pain that would once have sent me to A&E. Last summer, I managed to get stung by a jellyfish without actually realizing for several days. I was writhing in pain, but I just readily accepted this new type of agony as just a new symptom without question. I had no expectation of relief, and I refused to be taken to hospital. An observer might describe me as being used to pain, but I think that implies a lessening of feeling. What's actually changed is my expectations and my response to pain, and also other symptoms like fatigue. I mask and push through pain, but it wears me down and still profoundly impacts me. Coping comes with complications, and I think this is equally true with commonplace kinds of suffering. I wish that the medieval people we're used to, X crowd, would pause to think about that. My masking of pain is something I find hard to describe to many people who aren't in pain every day. That pain is my default, but it's still noticeable. I think some of these people are surprised by how much pain I'm in, maybe don't believe me because of what they've seen me do and achieve. But these people didn't see that during my master's, I attended classes whilst in agony. And during both of my degrees, I completed assignments, usually late, mostly while lying in bed because of how severe my fatigue was. But there are also others who might expect me to have managed my illness better to make it even less visible. At one point during my undergraduate degree, I was in an incredibly deep depression, and I have been struggling to keep up with the 3 essays I was required to write per fortnight. I explained my circumstances to a tutor, and she said that I should reconsider pursuing academia unless I could learn to manage my mental health problems. She said she had a disability herself, but she made use of her good days, essentially making sure her illness didn't encroach on her academic work. I was really humiliated by this comment, which was in front of my classmates. And I see this as kind of a form of getting used to illness and pain, which is expected of disabled folks and not attainable for all. 6 years later, I'm significantly more disabled than I was that day, and I'm learning to manage a new array of symptoms and diagnoses, and I'm so glad I didn't give up on academia. I can't manage my symptoms around traditional academic timeframes, so I study part-time, an option which was not available to me as an undergraduate. Disability is hard to manage, but the onus should not just be on us disabled people to adapt, but also on institutions to accommodate us. I'm grateful for the accommodations I've received so far in my academic journey, but it's clear that institutions are still not quite used to including disabled students, nor are all scholars used to taking historic suffering seriously. Thank you.
So before we get to the Q&A, I think Alex wants to come and say something.
Thank you, Ashley. Hi, everyone. So after the first 5 years of the DisMed Roundtable, we made a book. So just to let you know that this exists, there's plenty of postcards here if you want to come and take one at the end. We have 9 chapters in the book. We get gradually more medieval as we go through, all sorts of different things that we talk about. We've also just made a podcast on the Multicultural Middle Ages series as well. They wouldn't let us make an audiobook of the book, we asked. So we did a podcast, which I think is the next best thing. So do check that out as well.